That was a juicy one.
Last Sunday?
Oh yeah,
Yesterday?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was great because it touches a lot of different things that, at a personal level,
Yeah.
when you're dealing with, say, I know our church doesn't like this to discuss this part of it, but it's important,
Yeah.
which is the finances, and it's tithing, and it's the condition of the heart, and a whole bunch of different things that flow from there.
Yeah.
But more or equally important, it's the confidence that we have in God rather than in ourselves. Now, it sounds kind of weird, saying something like that, but the truth is that we could have, in the example you gave, what we do with $100 million, we could have $100 million in the bank.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really mean anything when it comes to where your confidence is at. Your confidence could be in your money, could be taken away from one day to the next.
That's right.
God forbid, but and we're not in any way saying, hey, we don't like wealthy people, because we do, and if you are that wealthy, give to our church. But what we're saying is that our treasure is not there. Our treasure is with God. Our confidence is with God. Now, one of the things that, like I said, this touched a lot of people. It has to touch a lot of people at a personal level. Is how do we put that confidence away from what we do, something that's tangible, something like say our work, or maybe even our bank account, or anything that has to do with us, and rely completely on God. What is the difference there in confidence when we're saying, hey, confidence in my bank versus confidence in my God?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's basically just understanding on a heart level that everything that you have received from God. It's such an illusion to think that anything that you have, you've earned. I mean, I get it. Like, when you work, you get a paycheck. Like, hey, I worked for that, and the result of the work that I did is that I get paid. I'm like, okay, that's fair. But who gave you the energy? Who gave you the contacts? Who gave you the resources? Who gave you the opportunities? Who gave you the health? Like, everything that you have essentially comes from God. But we're under this illusion that we have done the work to get what we have. But when you boil it down, you realize that when you go back to the deep source of everything, it's actually God. So it's a false belief that because I have $100 million, that then there's my safety, because we know the economy, whatever can happen is going to be gone. And sometimes that's what it takes for you to be able to realize, maybe not that God is in control, but definitely that you're not. We just had the fires in California, I mean, $1 million homes, just all of a sudden, like, these people, I guarantee you, I mean, not all of them, of course, but like a high percentage of them had a big reality check of understanding that, man, I thought I had my whole life lined up, but all of a sudden, boom, it's all gone. And so for us as Christians, I think it's easier to understand because we have the biblical perspective. We understand that things come from God. But sometimes that's what it takes. It takes something catastrophic to happen for you to just be hit with that reality, But I think that it's an illusion to think that we, have any control. And that's the beauty of, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, that's interesting you said that, because earlier you mentioned something that's very, very real. And by saying real is something we could all relate to, but don't realize it. Now, you give the example of saying, hey, if you have $100, you're going to tithe 10. That's a fair, right? Per scripture, it's like, okay, you're a tenth, right? But in reality, it's reversed. That's God's money, meaning that those 100 belong to God. He's allowing you to keep 90.
Yeah.
He's saying, hey, I don't need your money.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, when you look at that in the reverse, why is that? How could that be healthy for us in our relationship with God? Because, you're saying that, hey, you know what? I know that you're saying, hey, we come to church on Sunday, and Josh, you're pretty good today. So almost like, yeah, okay,
I'm going to pay you for
I'm going to pay you for your services. But it's not like that. It's way beyond that, because you're making money that God has allowed you to make, right? And everything, silver and gold, belongs to the Lord.
Yeah.
He's allowing us to keep 90%,
Yeah.
10%. And by no means is this podcast saying, hey, you have to tithe. We're not, our church is not one to say, put pressure on you. We say that every Sunday.
Yeah.
Hey, the Lord, it's a condition of the heart. My question here is, why is that a healthy approach, a healthy view when we're dealing with money? What will you say something like that?
Yeah, so I grew up believing that the tithe belongs to the Lord. That's what I grew up believing. But the reality is that that's not true. Everything belongs to the Lord. He's given you everything, and a tithe is really a representation of the whole. It's basically saying, I know everything that I have comes from you. I'm going to give it back to the source. I have no fear because I know where it comes from. So wherever I'm giving it back to, I know that all of the blessings that I have comes from that same source, so there's no fear in that. It's really the essence, in my opinion, the essence of the part of the Lord's Prayer that says, give us today our daily bread. So give us today our daily bread is not about God give us bread. It's not what he's talking about. He's not literally saying give us bread, He's referencing the Old Testament. He's referencing the time that the Jews had in the desert where God was providing them daily bread, manna, every single day, and it would only last for one day. And if you kept it for the next day, it was filled with maggots. And so they were literally dependent on the Lord every single day for their literal provision. And so the prayer for us, at least in our case, give us today our daily bread, may sound kind of weird because I have bread. I got a pantry full of food. I'm not wondering where my next meal is coming from. So how do we apply that to ourselves when we have more than enough? So what we do is we try to allow for God to answer that prayer so that we can feel in reality in our lives what the Jews felt in the desert, which was dependence on God, just the sense of connection with God every single day. So how do we have that if we have more than enough? Because it's harder for us to be able to understand that connection because many times we don't feel that we depend on God. We feel like we depend on ourselves. So that's where the tithe comes in, because what we're doing is we are taking a step of faith. We're taking a leap of faith. We're realizing that with less margin, our control kind of goes away. Like we don't have this margin because 10% is a lot. I mean, if you're making $100,000, like 10% is a lot of money. That is a lot of money, and it's not a minor thing. That's a car payment, or a lease on a car, like whatever it is. It's like a thing that you have to. It's not the whole thing, but it's not 1%. It's enough so you feel it. And you realize like this is a big step. Like I need faith to do this, So you take that, and it's faith. You're taking faith, and you're saying that you're not relying on the math, because if you rely on the math, you're like, I can't live on 90. Like we're living in California. Like I can barely make it. But you take that step and you do it anyway. And here's the thing that's so beautiful that I love, and I hear this story over and over and over again. So many times you hear this story. It's like I didn't know what to do. Like I felt like God was calling me to tithe. I didn't know where where that money was going to come from. I didn't have it, but I gave it to the Lord, and then God provided for me miraculously. Now, I've heard that so many times. Now, we don't want to make doctrine out of personal experience, but the reality is that you hear that so many times that you realize that the invitation isn't to give God money. He has all the money. It's all his. Right. The invitation is to be able to have a closeness with the Lord that you wouldn't have otherwise. That's why it's so hard too, because money is a personal thing. That's why God talks about there's a link between your resources and your heart. Like it's emotional. It's not just, here's all the, this 10%, like 10,000. If you get 100, like $10,000, here's $10,000. That's a lot of money. There's something emotional that happens, and when you let that go, you're like, okay, like I don't know what's going to happen here, and then you're kind of waiting for God to come through for you, and then He does. You're like, oh my gosh, this whole thing is real. Like God is actually here with me, and that's what you want.
Oh, wow. That's a great explanation as far as how we have that connection between God and ultimately, I hate to say it, with money.
Yeah.
But it's real. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm more than sure that a lot of members, including myself, feel that. It's like, oh man, it's like, I know what God is asking of me, and that's really, really difficult. I'm going to do it, take this leap of faith. And it's hard.
And there's so much freedom when, as a pastor, you're being obedient in preaching. And also when as a church, that you've been here for 156 years, So you're not asking for money because you know who your provider is.
Yes.
Like he's proven himself over the years. So you don't feel like you're begging people for money. Like this is for you. This is not for us. Like we know where our money comes from. As a church, we know it's been here. God has been with us. You know, we don't want anything from you. We want this for you. This is
Absolutely.
for you. Yeah.
That's why I like that example you gave too. So one of the things that, you know, and I tell you from the beginning, this is going to be one of those messages that it hits home really hard because, you know, you're telling us, hey, you know what, we're the 50% are wealthy. Mm-hmm. Some people might say like, I don't feel wealthy. But then you say, well, who you're comparing yourself to, right? You compare to Bill Gates. Yeah, no, you're not wealthy. Mm-hmm. You know, Jeff Bezos, you're not. Mm-hmm. You know, Elon Musk, no. Yeah. You know, but if you compare yourself when you took your trip to Africa, and then you see that these individuals that are in a place where they're totally dependent on God for their next meal, then you're like, you know, it's heartbreaking, right? Yeah. Because something happens to you that's extremely real. Yeah. You start seeing like, hey, back home, I open up the fridge, I have food there. If I feel like a snack in the middle of the night because I can't sleep, okay, warm milk, whatever it is, it's there. Yep. You go to a restaurant over there, you're looking through that, and you're like, I can pick anything I want here, and it's not going to hurt me. But yet, that food that I'm looking at right here, and you had a very surreal moment there. It's like it shook you. Now, here, when we're saying, hey, what step do I need to take? Mm-hmm. If there was let's say one step, even a minor one, somebody is new in their church or somebody, one of our members, and saying, Josh, what do I need to do to take that first step? Even if it's a baby step, what is it?
Yeah, I think that's it's a good question because the goal is to be closer to God. That's everything in our lives, like discipleship in its essence, it's being closer to God. And being closer to God always means dying to something. And so I think that the most baby step you could ever take is to make the decision to go to church every Sunday, which is a weird one. It's kind of like, that's not a big deal, but it really is. And I have never, ever come across anyone. It's like going to the gym. You know, it's like you don't want to go, but you're always glad that you did. You know what I'm saying? That happens with church too. It's like, oh man, I got to get up, whatever. Our services are at 10 and 11:30. Like that's not early. You know, it's like, but I get it. It's the weekend. Maybe you went out the Saturday before, but it's a sacrifice. Regardless, it is a sacrifice. But you go and I would say at least 99% of the people, when you go, like it's a sacrifice. You got to get the kids ready, whatever. But then when you leave, like you're glad you went to church.
I like the example you gave earlier as well, though. Can you add that where you're saying you've never heard?
Oh, right. So yeah. Okay. Here's a story I've never heard. I've never heard a story that someone comes up to me and says, Pastor, you know what? My marriage is amazing. You know, I've never felt closer to God. Spiritually, I'm advancing in every area. My career's going amazing. And you know what the secret is? I stopped going to church. And my whole life just panned out perfectly. Obviously, we laugh because that's never the case. No. It's never the case. You know, and I'm not saying that going to church is like the silver bullet that's going to resolve all of your problems. But there is, I mean, I've been doing this for a while. And there's a direct correlation between a person's life going positively and going negatively with their church attendance. I mean, there's no way around it.
Yeah. You know what? I can attest to that.
Okay.
I've been coming to church for a long time, and I can tell you that my wife and I, my family, it's truly a blessing. Mm-hmm. Now, when we weren't coming to church, you know, and this was a long time ago, it was a totally different experience altogether in life. Mm-hmm. Having Christ in the middle, in our home, and us coming to church, you're absolutely right. Everything, it's a game changer. You know, and I think that's one of the biggest impact that people that are visiting our church get to experience. They have a pastor that is up there, you know, doing his jokes. You know, sometimes they hit. No, they're hitting. You know, so far so good. You know, but they can relate. They can relate because it's not something that they're used to where they're saying, hey, you're going to hell if you don't know. Yeah. What you're providing is just an example saying you're going to do the best you can, and God's going to take the rest.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that's transforming our church in the direction that God is preparing our church. And we are seeing that because our church is almost being filled up.
Yeah.
We have families coming in all the time, and they're bringing kids. It's a beautiful thing, and we've been saying this for a while now, that the Lord's doing something beautiful in our church. We're not into numbers.
No.
We're into families coming, making that connection, and that's why I really appreciate when you said, you know what, if you come here, stay here, but the biggest thing is to make a connection with Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's one of the things that I just truly is a blessing to see.
Yeah.
Now, you also gave an example, the parable with the rich man.
Oh, yeah.
And storing up grain, and he said, instead of saying, hey, you know what, I'm gonna give this away to, he goes, no, I need more barns.
I need bigger barns.
Yeah, but one of the things that in here that's really of just caught my attention was that Jesus says, at that time he says, you fool, now your soul is required of you. So that's it. You store all this, who's gonna go just to other people? Now, another mention of that where Jesus is saying, hey, you know what, if you're gonna go to make a sacrifice, be sure you're okay with your brother. But in one of those stories, it also says that it says, you can't even call your brother you fool, because you will be in risk of hellfire. So there's a relation right there, and there's the fool going to hell. My question here is this: when we are looking at the story, and we're just saying, like, so are we not to like rich people? Are we not to store for tomorrow? What's the biggest difference between storing for tomorrow or being wealthy? There's nothing wrong with being wealthy or saving. What's the difference between what we're saving and being wealthy versus the rich man in this parable?
Oh, that's a great question. Great question. So if you notice at the end of the story, he says, I'm gonna paraphrase it, but he says, this is what will happen to you unless you are rich toward God. And so basically what he's saying is there's not a problem with being rich. The problem is storing up wealth for yourself while not being rich toward God. So like you can store up for yourself and for your family. I think that's a good thing. I think we should do that. I think that's part of our responsibility, but it shouldn't be in replacement of being rich toward God. That's the only problem. Like you can store up for yourself, but if that's taking away from being rich toward God, meaning being greedy. So greedy means it's I heard a pastor say this, it's all for our, it's the assumption that it's all for our consumption. That's the thing. It's like everything that I have is for me. It's for me. It's for me. It's for me. It's like, no. It's for your enjoyment. But greed comes in when it's the assumption that it's all for your consumption. And being rich toward God means giving some of it away. But not just like, a little tip, like something that you can actually feel that causes you to depend on God more.
I love that. I love that part there. You said something you could feel.
You can feel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That is.
And it's not about money. So you go back to the widow with the 2 copper coins.
Were you looking at my notes?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Dude, I was completely going to go there.
Let's go, man.
You already took my thunder away from the little, I was going to say the greed assumption. I was like, dude, I was like, oh man, he took it. But you're right though. Yep. I mean, that's totally in my notes. I was going to tell you that now, because we're in a place where we're saying like, hey, you know what? I give, but it doesn't hurt, and we're not saying, hey, give everything. No. We're saying that like the poor widow, right? She gave 1/64 of a denarii, which is like less than a penny. But nobody noticed that.
Yeah.
Jesus noticed that.
Yeah.
From far away, he's like, yeah. And everybody's like, oh, well, what are you talking about? Everybody's giving. He's like, no. She gave from not the leftovers. She gave everything that she
Yeah.
had, right? And again, we're this sounds like a prosperity,
No.
but this is not the case for this podcast. We're just trying to decipher here. Hey, you know what? Where's your heart at? Where's the
Yeah.
condition of your heart? That's why I really appreciate what you said right now, where he says it has to hurt, and not in the hurt. We're like, oh man, I'll be broke. No. It has to hurt, saying like the Lord's saying, hey, you know what? Where are your treasures at?
Yeah.
They shouldn't be over there. It should be here with me. And that treasure that we're talking about is not financial. It's not that. No. It's where's your heart at?
Yeah.
Your heart has to be with me over here. We don't care about your money. That's the biggest thing with this church is like we've been here, like you said, 156 years. We're not going anywhere.
No.
But right now we're doing here what you're doing here on this stage is saying, hey, where's your heart at with Jesus? That's what we care about.
Yeah.
Because God is going to provide.
Yeah.
Our confidence is not in the finances of this church, and we're very, very great about that. I can tell you right now as an elder, we're great at managing the church's money to all the ministries.
Yeah.
I love that part about us.
Yeah.
So we don't care about that. What we care about, what you care about, what you do every Sunday up there is making sure and you give those examples time and time again. And that's why I think the people are filling up in those pews is because you want to know where's your heart at when it comes to Jesus.
That's it.
That's
it.
amazing.
And the cool thing, it's not about your money. It's about you create a space. It's almost like you create this space for God to come through. But you have to create that space. That's that step of faith that opens it up for God to show up. You want to live that way. I want to live that way. I don't want to live controlling everything, even though I'm a control freak. We've talked about that. But you want to intentionally create that space for you to be able to see God come through in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, this was a very enjoyable one because it made me sweat a little bit too. Here, it's like woo. But as always, I have to maintain and ask the question, what's next?
So we're going to continue next Sunday with the Lord's Prayer, and we're going to go to the part where it says, "Forgive us our debts, as we also forgive us our trespasses, as we also forgive those who trespass against us." It can be translated debt too. It depends on the translation. So it's this whole idea of the Lord's Prayer. We've talked about the Lord's Prayer not being about getting God to do things for you. It's about adjusting your heart to the will of God. And so this prayer has two parts. That section of the prayer has two parts. One is forgive us our debts, which is okay, or forgive us our trespasses. But then it's connected to as we forgive those who trespass against us. In other words, let's create this partnership to where my forgiveness is kind of not dependent, because that's not there's a correlation. Like keep me in check.
Yes.
Like don't let me demonstrate the forgiveness I have received by the forgiveness that I give too. That's awesome. So that's kind of the evidence of it. So we're going to unpack that a little bit.
Oh, it's going to be great. That's going to be great. Perfect. Well, Josh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless you.
You too.
And I'll see you on Sunday.
All right, man. Thanks.
All right, take care.
All right. Bye, guys.